All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Founder's Cut. Today I'm here with Grant Cermak. He is the co founder and CEO of Evergreen Miner. So, before we jump into the conversation about what you do at Evergreen, I wanted to take a moment to talk about who you are as an individual. We've talked in the past, so I know your background, and for other people that might not know you, I think it's a very interesting professional journey, at least from what I remember. And so, I'd love for you to kind of talk about where you were before you became the CEO of Evergreen.
So I've been developing software for 20 years. So got my start at a startup company. The first thing I ever did was start digitizing plaster models for the orthodontic industry. That was the first startup company that I ever did. And it was a great experience with respect to startups because I had the opportunity to do a variety of different things. I got to work on software, I got to work on hardware. So what we were doing was digitizing these plaster molds, and they were required to be humidity and temperature controlled, which meant that this medical record was taking up a ton of space, especially in places that were very space constrained, right? If you look at the East Coast, particularly, they would have these warehouses that, if certain conditions happened, then these medical records could be destroyed. So there was a real need for this in the industry. So we built a laser scanning system that could digitize these plaster models, and it could also rapid prototype print 3D using 3D printing. So you could print a negative, repour the plaster, and then use that if you need to go into the courtroom or whatever to prove that you had actually done what you were supposed to do as an orthodontist. So it was a great experience. I had a chance to do a ton of different things. Took all of the learning that I had from doing motion control for this startup company, and I went and worked in the defense industry for a while. So I got to work on a bunch of different large robotic systems. I got to work with NASA, got to work with Northrop Grumman, Navy. Just had a great experience working on robotics and automation. Found that I didn't really want to be a defense subcontractor. I didn't want to really build weapons or machines that were related to weapon systems. I then took a job at Starkey Labs doing hearing aid modeling, got to learn some core technology there, and eventually ended up at Vital Images doing medical imaging. And that was a big chunk of my career. Like 10 years of my life was spent in medical imaging, and it was fantastic experience. I got to work with the latest and greatest hardware, GPUs, software. Everything that we were doing was very cutting edge, and it required us to be on the bleeding edge because the data sets were so large. What we were doing with advanced visualization required a ton of computing power. So it really put me on the forefront of computing, storage, and a lot of different technologies. From Vital, I ended up going to work for another startup company called Nucleus Health, and it was there that I first started working on blockchain technology. At Nucleus, we were building medical imaging in a web browser,
What year was
and
that? What year were you starting blockchain? When was that then?
so this would have been in 2015 is
Okay.
when I first
Okay.
started working on blockchain technology.
Early days.
Early days. This is right when Ethereum had just come out and had just started to be something people were thinking about. So it had been beyond the first wave of blockchain technology, which would have been like Bitcoin and Litecoin and Dogecoin and a lot of that other stuff. But it was just on that next vanguard set of Ethereum and the explosion of other blockchains that were about to occur between 2015 and 2017.
Sure. Very cool. Sorry, I cut you off there, but it sounded like you were there in the early days. So I wanted to see what when that was dated at. But yeah, so yeah, I cut you off. But yeah, we'd love to hear the how you ended up getting the rest of the stops before you got to Evergreen.
So at Nucleus, we were doing medical imaging in a web browser, and so the person who was principally founding the company had worked on writing a completely JavaScript based engine for doing the rendering of medical data. And so we were able to, with a single URL, address an entire study of medical data. And so using that single URL, you could go to the page, you could then look through an entire set of CT or MRI data, and you could also do some really advanced stuff, like you could do obliquing the data set, and it's really cool stuff that hadn't been done before, especially in a browser. Anyway, when we built the technology, we built it so that would be securities compliant with respect to how the specific institutions would want to see the security footprint of the technology. And one of the principal things that we did was make it so that the architecture was completely siloed, so there was no commingling of data. And we referred to that as single tenancy. So we had these single tenant deployments, and then what our customers ended up asking us to do was to say, well, can you make it so that we can share data between these different deployments, which is kind of the antithesis of what they had originally asked us to do, which was to make it so that we didn't commingle their data. So instead of building just another system, we went and looked to see if there was a way to enable federated data access. And by federated data access, I mean that we would have the ability to have all these different systems kind of coordinating in a peer-to-peer and trustless way. And that's kind of exactly what Solidity and Ethereum were enabling, or what they were touting to be able to do. So we took a look at their technology, we adapted it so that we could use the database that is the blockchain to put pointers to our studies into the blockchain, and then use the Solidity smart contracts to do access control, right? And so now we have access control, we have authentication, we have this peer-to-peer trusted thing. We demonstrated it at a hackathon. It was very well accepted and acclaimed. And we said this technology is really too great to just leave inside of Nucleus Health. So we spun it out into a company called Mint Health, and from there started working on a security token for Mint Health. Started working on using this technology to do self-sovereign health records. And then from there, I had a chance to work with a lot of different companies in consulting fashion. I was the chief security officer at Exodus for a period of time. So I got a chance to work on blockchain in a very comprehensive way at a lot of different companies. And then in 2020, I heard about Chia as a blockchain. It is something that when I was originally working on Nucleus and Mint Health, I had heard about, and I didn't really understand it at the time. I thought it was like a storage thing, but it ended up not being a storage thing at all. And in 2020, I got deep into that technology, learned about how it really worked, and got really excited about it as one of the next developments that I saw in blockchain technology. It was kind of like Bitcoin paved the way. Ethereum sort of did something really interesting and novel in a way that hadn't really been seen or done well before. And then Chia comes along, solves the energy problem for Bitcoin, and enables a really decentralized, high security chain that can be used by enterprises. So I got some storage online, started working with the technology, started building out some of the open source technology that would form the foundation of Evergreen, and then got connected with my co-founder, Dylan Rose, and we started working on Evergreen in earnest. And in October of 2022, we launched the Evergreen Miner V2, and that's my journey to Evergreen.
Yeah, so let's jump right into it. What is the reason that you and Dylan came together? So obviously you just don't want to be a hardware company that builds miners. What was the reason that you decided let's join forces and take on a new venture together?
So I had been working on Chia technology for a different startup company, and it just so happened that through the course of developing it, that they had done this big side-by-side comparison of different chains that they wanted to use, and in the end, it came down to kind of like two chains that we were looking at. It was Chia and Solana, right? And so when we were building Chia, we were really early to the tech, and we even identified this as a risk that we were so early to it that the ecosystem hadn't developed that much, and some of the primitives that the company needed weren't even there. And by primitives, I mean things like NFTs and asset tokens. This stuff really didn't even exist when we first started working on it. So it was identified as a risk, and eventually we got far enough through it that the company said, we really need to switch chains. It isn't quite ready to do what we're doing. And for me, I really wanted to work on Chia. So I had a whole pile of technology and software that I had built. And when I looked at Evergreen, I said, this is exactly the technology that's needed to make this work. And so when Dylan and I joined forces, it was because we had met in the community and we had gotten to know each other pretty well. So he said, hey, can any of the stuff that you're working on, this open source technology, be applied to Evergreen? And it was a really great fit. So that's kind of how we got together. Is I had been working on something else. There was a bunch of technology that seemed like it would be applicable to what Evergreen needed. And also we got to know each other through the Chia community, which is just a really tight knit and really great community to get exposed to other people, other founders, and other people that are building on top of the chain.
So you're coming up on two, 2 to 3 years now, right? 3 years. Where, how much have you done in the last 3 years? I know you, I met you pretty much in the middle of your journey, and you've been moving fast from what I've seen. So we'd love to hear kind of from start to where you are today. What's the company look like?
So the company was founded in 2021 by Dylan, and I got involved kind of in the beginning, the first quarter of 2022. So I've really had a chance to work with the team for about a year and a half or so, I'd say. And in that time, we've managed to launch a direct-to-consumer hardware company, which is just a fantastic difficult challenge in itself, right? If you just look at like what are you trying to do, and can you launch a direct-to-consumer hardware company? It's like the first hurdle that we had to surmount. Then the next thing was, did we find a market at all for the product? Which I think we've not checked off both of those boxes thus far. People are really excited about it. They purchased, quite a few of the units, and we have a pretty large installed user base out there. Some things that we've done recently are we launched our own piece of technology, which allows for the device to be used in a distributed fashion with a very low footprint. It's called a light farmer. That was launched earlier this year. And so kind of the next phase of what we're doing at Evergreen is onboarding some more technology into the stack that allows our device to be used in a more broad fashion, right? So far, it's been very specific to earning on the Chia network. But what we want to do with the platform is enable distributed applications. So you can think of things like Tornado Cash, right? Now, this is a specific piece of technology that allowed for coin mixing, and it caught a lot of attention in the media because some people were using it to try and hide their tracks, and different types of individuals were using this tech to try to hide what they were doing. And so it got targeted, right, as something that was centralized and was identified as not desirable, right? Now, this type of application, right, when you have scrutiny on it, it ends up coming to bear because it's being run on a centralized server. It's being run in a centralized place. But if you can run the apps on your own infrastructure, right, then you no longer have this centralized intermediary point that can be shut down. And so running dApps on your own hardware, or being able to run peer-to-peer apps on your own hardware, is a very compelling type of idea. And so this is where we want to take Evergreen in the next phase, is allowing developers to create applications that would run on top of Evergreen, as well as enabling a peer-to-peer infrastructure that can run on your own personal server. So that's a way I think we would like to have people start to think about Evergreen as we move forward. Is it's a platform on which you can run distributed peer-to-peer apps, and it's kind of more than a miner.
Yeah. Speaking of the hardware, how many units have you sold now through version 1 and 2?
So the V2 miner is what we launched last year. The V1 was kind of the first prototype that Dylan originally put together when he first had the idea of doing Evergreen. It had like the computer and the hard drive all in one unit, and it was 3D printed. So the V2 miner is something we started out 3D printing, and then we quickly moved to injection molding because there was just too many demands of people buying them, and we just couldn't keep up with it from the 3D printed perspective. So we went and created some injection molds, and then we also had to start creating our own custom printed circuit boards to enable it. We have over 1,000 users that are actively utilizing our devices, like as of a few days ago.
Love it, love it. And then, um, with all that traction of 1,000 users, has it allowed you and the team to do other things now that your network has grown, or is that kind of irrelevant to like the roadmap that you have in place for Evergreen?
I think once you hit a certain milestone of total users using something, it starts to become very interesting for others to get closer to you, right? Like if you have 10 people using something or 100 people using something, it's not that big. But once you get to a thousand, it's kind of, you cross the threshold where there's enough people that it's starting to become pretty interesting as a place to dive into or start to do some co-marketing or co-development on. So I'd say that it is a traction that's attractive to developers and people that want to build on top of an existing network. So it's certainly something that we feel is a big milestone, getting to 1,000 users.
Love it. And then, in terms of just um, life lessons along the way, you kind of alluded to the fact that starting a hardware company is very challenging. For any founders that are out there listening, like what kind of what were some things that maybe you'd wish you knew when you first got started on this journey alongside Evergreen?
As far as starting a hardware company,
Well, just in general, I guess just being a startup founder in general, right?
so I'd say having done a variety of different startup companies throughout time, I would say be prepared to bootstrap. That's always, kind of like if you're going to go after this and say we're going to raise money and we're going to have plenty of runway, I'd say that's the rarity in doing startup companies. More often, what you need to do is be really careful about how you spend your money and the ways that you use funds. So try to be very judicious in growing your team or growing your expenses, to try to keep that to a minimum as much as you can, because you just don't know what's going to happen as far as your company goes. And you need to be really careful about what you spend money on and any kind of carried costs that you have, right? I'd say focusing in on that and also getting your books in order, like, because at some point people are going to want to invest in your company if you realize some amount of success, and having your accounting done is just goes a long way towards being attractive towards investment, because it shows that you have some maturity, and it also shows that you can demonstrate to somebody else why you would be a good investment. Just being able to show your financials, it's one of the first questions you're going to get asked.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice to know your numbers and know, how you're going to spend your money and ultimately where you're going to even get your money to start off, right? For folks that might be curious about, learning more, where can they find you? Like, what's the website URL? And, maybe talk about just like the price point for entry for getting them their hands on their own hardware to run their own node.
So Evergreen Miner, so Evergreen, just like the tree or the shipping containers that you might see, and then Miner, Miner, evergreenminer.com. That's the website. With respect to the price points, so the cool thing about Chia is it's very scalable. So you can get in at a really low price point and scale out as big as you want. Now, the device that we've gotten to like the most is our entry level starter kit, which is the Raspberry Pi and then either one or two hard drives. And the way that the Chia network works is the more hard drive space that you have on the network, the more that you earn in securing the network, right? So just like in Bitcoin, if you have more hashing power, then you earn more rewards. In Ethereum, the more GPU power you had, the more rewards that you earn. In Chia, the more space that you have, the more that you earn. So you can buy a single hard drive, and then later, if you want to upgrade and get more earnings on the Chia network, you can buy an additional set of drives. So what we've seen is people will buy one drive, they'll kind of get used to it, and then they'll say, okay, I want to get 10 more drives. And so going from saying having one drive to four drives, or going from four to say having 10 drives, it allows you to scale up. So I'd say kind of the entry level price point is maybe $500, but one of our most popular kits is around 1,500.
Okay. Yeah, nice. And and then basically, I like to kind of approach this because it's still early days for crypto and all this kind of stuff. If you're trying to explain this to an 8-year-old, what does the common person need to do once they have your starter kit, right? What would they have to do on their end?
So we try to make it as easy as possible. This is a plug and play device. So everything that you need comes with it. You don't have to go find some additional stuff. You don't have to go buy additional pieces of equipment. So when you buy one of our kits, whether it's the starter kit, the plus kit, or the pro kit, it comes with all the cables, the hard drives, and everything all preloaded, pre-plotted. So when you take everything out of the box, all the cables pretty much only have one place that you can plug things in. So you plug in all of the cables, turn it on, and then there's a really easy to use mobile app that allows you to do configuration and setup. And then that same app allows you to catch the rewards that you get for doing the actual mining. So it has a built-in self-custody wallet, as well as the ability to monitor and keep track of the device. So over time, your device is, like earning, or it's producing outputs, and you can go into the app and you can see its performance over time. So it's the built-in mobile app that's kind of like a Ring doorbell. So it's intended to be really, really easy to use, really simple to set up.
Is Evergreen Miners currently only for the Chia network, or can it be used for mining on other networks as well?
Right now, it's still just on the Chia network. We've
Okay,
explored a lot of different opportunities, but we're still very much focused on Chia. That's not to say that that might not change in the future, but like so far, still Chia. That's the one that we're working with right now.
gotcha. Obviously, part of this reason I do this podcast is to try to help people network. What types of folks are you trying to get connected with these days?
So we are still a startup company that is very much interested in growing. So if the things that you've heard are very interesting, we would love to get connected with any investors. Also, anyone who heard that idea about having a distributed server platform, right? If you've ever contemplated saying, I really wish there was some infrastructure that could be used to do something. And something like Umbrel comes to mind, right? Umbrel is a suite of technologies that's intended to be run on a Raspberry Pi. But they never actually built the hardware so you could do it. So, in the setup guide for Umbrel, it says, go buy a Raspberry Pi and then set all this stuff up and get the hardware deployed. It's not exactly easy to do it. So if you could ever have contemplated like, oh, I wished I could be part of a network that looks something like this, we're very interested in connecting with any developers or people that are seeking for some kind of a peer-to-peer server infrastructure that they could run their application on top of.
Gotcha, gotcha. Before we wrap this up, anything, anybody, any opportunity, event that you want to shout out, feel free to.
Oh, you mean like an upcoming event where Evergreen's intended to
Upcoming
be?
event or people that have helped you along the way, whatever. Just want to give people an opportunity to throw something out there that they think want get exposure for.
I guess it would be a thank you to Back End Capital for being one of the first people that believed in Evergreen. We really appreciate like the people who have invested and helped Evergreen get started. And I'd say like they cut one of the first checks that really enabled us to get going. So just a big kudos and shout out to Back End Capital.
Love it, love it, love to hear the process working the way it should, right? People with money helping companies with really cool, bold ideas get out there and prove it, right? And so I love that. So, Grant, I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else that you want to throw out there before we wrap this up?
No, I don't think so. Just thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, so for people that are looking to figure out if they want to dabble in the world of becoming part of the infrastructure or the node for a up and coming type of network out there in the crypto space, or just want to be curious about learning more about it, go check out evergreenminer.com. Figure out if it's something that you want to give it a go. And, I've always been someone that's learned by doing. And so it's one of those things where it's always been fascinating to me. And I think you are doing something that's really important, right? Too often, the crypto space, the blockchain space has been seen as inaccessible. There's a lot of barriers from a technological perspective, but also from just like the way that we talk about things and, going and buying a Raspberry Pi for 9 out of 10 people in society, maybe even 99 out of 100 people, not very obtainable. But the fact that you've created the product that people can actually just plug and play, I think is going to be very helpful in getting people to understand the true potential of this in the future. So, Grant, keep doing what you're doing. Really like seeing everything you've done so far in the short amount of time that we've known each other. And again, thanks again for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks, Sam.